Okie dokie. So, enrichment. Let's think about why we have dogs. Why do all of us get a dog in the first place? Well, in some way, I mean, there's different motivations for different people, but as a rule, it's all about um, making our lives better. We get a dog to try and improve how we live and our quality of life. But what about them? Are we improving their quality of life or not? And that's kind of what enrichment is all about. Enrichment is all about that quality of life for our dogs. So, what we've done when we've domesticated the dog as humans, we have brought this dog, or the precursor to a dog, we brought them from their natural habitat where they're getting on with being dogs quite happily most of the time, and we've decided actually we want to bring them into our lives. It's going to be beneficial for both of us, so let's do that. But in the meantime, we're also changing their environments hugely. So we're trying to get this other species to fit in with how we live. And quite often what seems to happen is people forget about the dog's needs and what the dog wants, and just think about, right, how can I mould this animal, this different species that I have invited into my home to just fit in with everything that I want to make my life a whole heap better and all that kind of stuff without really thinking about them. So that is sort of the background. That's where we've come from as people with our dogs. But luckily for us, the story is moving forwards. The story, particularly over the last 10 years or so, 10 to 20 years, the story has started gathering a pace. And in the dog professional community, there's more and more talk about, well, it's great that we're having our lives enriched by a dog. What about their lives? How can we enrich their lives given that they are having to fit in with us? They're having to fit into houses and gardens and being fed and sometimes being in close contact with other animals that they're not allowed to chase or eat, which is what they want to do. So, we're asking an awful lot of our dogs. So, what is enrichment? Well, enrichment is about finding things which our dogs find enjoyable, but which are also safe. You might have, say, Dash, for example. I could let him off lead in the middle of town and he would probably have a lovely time running around, but it would be an idiotic thing to do because there are cars and all that kind of stuff. Or I could let him off on a farmer's field and he would have a brilliant time, but he could end up scaring the wildlife. So neither of those are very good enrichment activities because they're not very safe. I know this is a really silly thing to say, but we need to kind of we're sort of trying to define what enrichment is, because enrichment really is just doing things that they're enjoyable, that enrich our lives, that enrich our dogs' lives, but we do have to put that kind of little container around it so we're not being daft about it. So, and if we don't enrich our dogs' lives, what tends to happen? Well, to be honest with you, you end up getting an awful lot of behaviour problems, because what's happening is that our dogs either are getting bored or maybe they haven't got an outlet for a natural behaviour, which they have. And natural behaviours vary from breed to breed, from dog to dog. So there's lots of variation within a breed as well as between breeds as to what their preferred outlets might be. So for example, if you've got something like a spaniel, they like to follow things with their nose and have a good old sniff. We've got collies, they love rounding things up. And then we've got, hounds who are, just like to be over there and far away and doing their own thing, far from their human. So the natural behaviours really depend on the dog. So it's about knowing what your dog is. There's not really a one size fits all solution to this. So just because one person's doing it doesn't mean that you should be doing it. So don't panic for that. Because you see, the thing is, if we can't produce or create a controlled outlet for these natural behaviours, our dogs tend to become self-employed. So they will find outlets by themselves, and they will probably be outlets that we're not finding really too great. So, for example, again, spaniels are great examples for this kind of thing. Another thing that is a really nice outlet for a spaniel is they like to carry things, something that they've been bred to do. So if they don't have an outlet to do that, then they might steal your socks because they just want to carry them around because it's great. Or you might have a terrier, any type of terrier really. And terriers really, they've got that hunting instinct and that bite instinct. So if we don't have a healthy outlet for that, then they might go chasing things that they shouldn't. Or you might end up with something, a dog that will chase and kill animals, or all sorts of nasty stuff. So all sorts of stuff can happen like that. So the other thing with enrichment that's really important is about our own relationship with our dogs. So when we're interacting with our dogs, because we are getting them to live in this really artificial environment that is our homes, lots of nasty things happen to them that they're not going to like, whether we like it or not. So they're going to be confined for a time when they don't want to be. So that even if that's in your whole house, they're still confined in that space. They don't have that freedom. They are only being allowed to eat when we consider it appropriate for them to eat. We're going to be doing things like taking them to the vets, so all these things that are quite necessary but not necessarily pleasant for the dog are happening to them. So what that does is each of these things that's happening that the dog isn't really enjoying is worsening our relationship with them. So what we have to do is pay back by giving them good experiences. But the problem is that dogs are like us like this. So we as people have a bias to remember all about the bad stuff that's happened to us rather than the good stuff. And I'm sure you can all totally relate to that when you've related to the bad stuff, not the good stuff. And our dogs are the same. They'll go, oh, goodness me, when I went in the car ages ago, you took me to the vets. So what we need to do is we need to counteract that with over 100 different good experiences. So one bad experience can far outweigh 100 good experiences. And if we keep that in our heads, a lot of the time when we're interacting with our dogs, it can be so helpful in terms of building that relationship. So another bad experience you might have with your dog, or your dog might have with you, is if you shout at them. You tell them no. That's a bad experience. That's damaging that relationship. So you need to do something good and positive to kind of start leveling that out again a little bit. So think about that really carefully, and I think that's a really good way of trying to balance that relationship with our dogs in a positive way. So, enrichment. What is it? What can we do with enrichment? Well, as a society, the standard enrichment that we tend to do is a walk. Okay? But the trouble is, we put our dogs on the lead, and we take them out, we march them around the place, we get frustrated with them if they stop and sniff and that kind of thing, and then we go back home again. It's not massively enriching for our dogs. It's not really using an awful lot of brain. There's nothing really going on there. All it's doing is giving one type of exercise, okay? So that's what's happening when we're walking. So what else can we do? Well, there are various different ways we can use enrichment. So there's enrichment that we can have using food. There are non-food ways that we can enrich with our dogs as well. There's natural behaviours, and there is sort of companionship type stuff. So the food ones are another kind of classic, and that's getting our dogs to work for their food. Now, when I talk to clients about ditching the food bowl and saying, stop putting your dog's food in a bowl, use that food for enrichment and training instead. Sometimes they think, isn't that really cruel, making them work for it? Isn't that really, really mean? So I'd like to kind of turn that on its head. Because the way I look at it is, isn't it really cruel to not use their food for an enriching experience? Isn't it really, just putting it in a bowl? It's boring. So let's make their lives more interesting. Think about, I don't know if you go to zoos. I know a lot of us aren't very keen on zoos, but certainly over the last 20 years, you've started seeing more enrichment in zoo enclosures. So you might go to, I don't know, chimpanzees or orangutans, and there's food and it's hung up and buried in logs, and so that the animals are having to actually forage for it and actually work for it. And they found that the health and the and as well as the kind of, what's the word I'm looking for? They sort of get on better. The animals get on better and are generally in a better place because they've got this enrichment. So we're thinking very much about doing that for our zoo animals. Let's do that for our dogs as well. And we can tell when you do this, dogs work for their food. We can see actually how much more delight they get out of it. So if I work with a client, they said, well, look, my dog's not really very food motivated. I mean, all dogs are food motivated to an extent, but because otherwise they'd be dead. But there is definitely a continuum. There are some that are more so than others. And if you get the dog to work for food, they will generally be happier to take it than if it's just in a bowl. And that's something I think that surprises people sometimes when we actually do it. So it's another thing to think about. Is it really fair to my dog to just give them the food in the bowl? Why can't I make more of it? And I'm not talking about doing anything particularly fancy schmancy with it. You can do really, really simple things with food. So you can play games with food. You can even do little training games. I don't really put training in the category of enrichment. It's sort of on its own, but you can still do all those things. You could, games when you're throwing pieces of food for them to chase and that kind of thing are absolutely brilliant. You could do there's lots and lots of sniffing and finding games you can do with food. So I put a post up last week about cardboard chaos, which with a video to show you how to play that. That's a brilliant enrichment game for our dogs. You can do things like get something like a muffin tin, put food in each of the bits of the muffin tin, and then put a ball over the top. Now, this doesn't work if you have a ball obsessed dog, particularly. And then they can kind of snuffle around and work to get the food out of the muffin tin. You could even do something like get a towel and sort of swirl it around so it's got lots of little folds in it, put the food in there, and then your dog's got to work to get it that way. So there are loads and loads of simple things you can do. You can even keep it as simple as just scattering the food on the floor. So scattering the food on the floor, or preferably somewhere like in some grass or somewhere where they've really got to hunt for it, is a really cool idea. So those are the kind of things that we're talking about when we're talking about food enrichment. But what's non-food enrichment? Well, it includes things like toys, for instance. And toys are a brilliant way of enriching things with your dogs. For some dogs, they're more rewarding than food itself. So mixing things up. So if you just take your dog out, when you take them out for a walk, you throw a ball for them 20 times till the dog's tired. Then you go home again. That's not going to be particularly enriching. It might be quite obsessive for the dog, but it's not going to be enriching. That kind of repeated over and over again. Now, there are some people say that you should never throw a ball for your dog. I'm kind of in the, you can, but do it in moderation, because it can lead to injury. But things like that are great are things like tuggy toys. So playing a tuggy game with your dog, especially if you've got something like a bull breed, they absolutely love that. That's something that they, people worry about. It isn't going to encourage them to bite and to pull and that kind of thing. Guess what? They naturally want to do those things anyway. So whether we play that and we give them a sensible outlet for it, or we let them go self-employed and find their own outlet for it, they will find an outlet for it. So let's give them a sensible outlet and some enrichment. So those sorts of things. Chasey toys are really cool to use as well. I love those. So these are kind of your non-food based enrichment ideas. Then there are the ones which are all about natural behaviours. So again, it depends very much on your dog. So for some dogs, having a good old run-off lead, massively enriching. For most dogs, having a good sniff around, just the sense that are going here, there, and everywhere, having a lovely sniffari, massively enriching for them. You know, for some dogs, having some social interaction with other dogs can be massively enriching. However, for other dogs that aren't so keen on other dogs, it can be quite punishing for them to expect them to interact in that way with other dogs. So again, it's about knowing your dog and what they like, and sort of trying to understand what makes their little world go round when you're thinking about your enrichment. And then there's just that companionship, you know, sitting on the sofa, giving them a stroke, just having a little chat to them, that kind of thing. It's all paying into that relationship bank account. It's all making your relationship billions of times better, and it's enriching for them. That touch is really enriching. Getting the sort of, you know, the smells that are on you, that's going to be enriching. All those kind of things, super duper enriching. So those are the things that I'd like you to think about when we're talking about enrichment for our dogs. And also, you know, if you think about that, a couple of things that I'd really like everyone to take away from this. The first one is to remember that we've invited these animals into our homes, and we need to think about how we can make that a really good deal for them as well as being a good deal for us. It's not about trying to mold our dog to become something else so it happens to fit into a particular shaped hole that we've created for them. Okay, the second thing I'd really like us to remember is that balance, that one bad experience outweighs 100 good experiences. So if there is a bad experience, we need to really up our game with the good stuff, and let's keep that coming to keep our dogs happy and content. Because if we don't do it, they'll work out ways to do it themselves, and they probably won't be ways that we're really feeling that we're approving of. So that's really enrichment. Use your imagination. Do feel free to post some ideas in the group if you've got any, or in comments underneath the video when you watch it, to give us your ideas for enrichment. It's just so important, and it's not just about taking your dog for a walk every day. There are so many better and more fabulous things that we can be doing with our dogs. Now, just before I finish, for those people who live in my local area, I have had a post that's gone live today on my Facebook page. I'm doing a Christmas workshop, fun dog workshop. So it's all Christmas themed. It's going to be decorations, it's going to be sparkly things, it's going to be tricks and games and all sorts of stuff. Doing that in conjunction with Victoria from Happy Henry's Dog Wash. So we're going to be doing that together. It's down in Stowe near Stafford at the Village Hall. If you fancy it, book in nice and early. There aren't very many places. It should be a really good giggle. So I will be back with you next week on, yikes, Monday at 6 o'clock. So I will look forward to seeing you all then. Take care.